One's here to be the big time while the other will burn it down. But did both of them make the right attitude adjustment? Just keep watching. Let's just keep it real and figure out if these two lovebirds are singing the right song with equivalent attitude adjustments. So we'll start with Rollins, and after he turned on the Shield, he won his first World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 31 by cashing in on Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns as part of the Authority. Then he had an impressive 221 day following that, and he even held both the United States title and the World Heavyweight title for about a month at the same time. Then he would go on to win the heavyweight title a second time at Money in the Bank, only to be cashed in on by Dean Ambrose, who had won the ladder match earlier that night. But then let's flash forward 3 years later as Rollins lost his Universal title to The Fiend at Crown Jewel, but he still captained the Raw Survivor Series team. So when Team Raw lost in an embarrassing fashion to NXT, who had 4, SmackDown, who had 2, and Raw just having 1 win, he berated the entire Raw roster, and then he joined up with the Authors of Pain, Murphy, and eventually Theory as his disciples to be the new Monday Night Messiah. And he did have initial success as the Raw Tag Team Champion with Murphy, but then later he sacrificed himself at Survivor Series in 2020 and didn't go on to win another title until he captured the US title in October of 2022, when his former disciple Theory quickly ended that run just a little bit over a month later. But let's flip on over to Becky, and she debuted as part of Team PCB on July 13th, 2015, and was tied to Charlotte from day 1 on the main roster, and even after a mostly nondescript run as the inaugural SmackDown Women's Champion in 2016, she failed several times to get that title back until she finally snapped after losing a triple threat match to Charlotte at SummerSlam. So Becky did make some good points along the way, noting that Charlotte kept getting all of the opportunities because of her name, and so she let the hate flow through her to beat Charlotte for the title in September and then retain it twice more against her. But just before she was set to go one-on-one against Ronda Rousey at Survivor Series in a champion versus champion match, well, she led a raid of the SmackDown roster over to Raw, and she left that with a broken nose and a concussion at the hands of Nia Jax. And while that was truly the moment that the man came around, she did lose her title in her very next match. But Becky apparently loves a surprise return, because after a maternity leave of 15 months, she returned at SummerSlam to take out Carmella and stop her from getting her chance, and then beating Bianca in under 30 seconds to become the SmackDown Women's Champion. And at the same time becoming big time Bex, and just a few months later she did swap titles with Charlotte following the draft in a pretty awkward exchange to become the Raw Women's Champion. She held on to that title for the rest of the time until WrestleMania. But after about 2.5 years of playing nice, well, here we are again as Seth Rollins aligned himself with Paul Heyman by cashing in his favor from a few weeks earlier and then slamming a steel chair into Reigns' back and stomping him out to win WrestleMania 40's Night 1 main event. And Becky made another shocking return to win the women's tag titles with Lyra Valkyria, but when Lyra couldn't hold on and retain her titles for them even one night later by getting sent into oblivion, Becky immediately snapped and battered her with 3 manhandle slams. So the proverbial question is, was this attitude adjustment the right move for either of them? Well, I have to say it's a little bit more complicated than it usually is, because we usually like to take a look at what the superstar's normal state is and where they have the most success. But truth be told, there is no clear advantage for either of them here, as they both only have one more championship reign by embracing the fans than they do by embracing their inner demons. But that aforementioned maternity leave, well, that gave these crazy kids time to also get married, so when Becky returned less than 2 months later, she was ready to go big time and join her husband in being a visionary, and so she went on to beat Bianca. And then flash forward a year later when Becky lost in her final rematch to Bianca. Well, she also hurt her shoulder during that match, but she couldn't let Damage Control debut by getting the best of both of them. So when she returned at Survivor Series to help Bianca's team, well, her husband lost his US title on that very same night, but he was inspired to join her in working for good. And they did indeed fight that good fight for several years, but it was not without a lot of hardship along the way, as Rollins lost several chances to regain that US title right afterward, but he was given a lifeline that he held on to tightly by winning 3 straight matches to become the inaugural World Heavyweight Champion at Night of Champions in May 2023. But heavy is the head that wears the crown, because even though he had 10 successful defenses, it was simply too much for his body to handle as he got injured, hurting his MCL and his meniscus that kept him out of action from January until WrestleMania 40, when he lost both his tag match to the Bloodline and then his title to Drew McIntyre. Then he needed 3 more months just to get 1 more match that he lost for the title as well. And then that cost him another 4 months before he was finally able to return for good. But so far, his return has not even given him 1 opportunity at another championship. But at the same time, Becky had no issue winning titles, but she had a much tougher time holding on to them, because she did win the women's tag titles with Lita, only to lose them for Trish, taking her out in her first title defense. Then she dropped down to NXT to win that title, but lost that one 42 days later by overtaxing herself with 5 defenses in such a short time. And indeed, that ended up costing her in a loss to Lyra. She still earned her way to face Rhea for the Women's World Championship at WrestleMania 40, only to come up short. And yes, she took advantage of a gift by winning a Battle Royal to win the title just 2 weeks later when Rhea had to vacate it, but she again had 0 successful defenses, losing her title to Liv and then losing a rematch 2 nights later. And then she walked off for good, well, at least for 11 months. But of course, when she did return, she was pretty happy to win those tag team titles with Lyra, only then to turn around and lose it on her very first defense less than 24 hours later. So in conclusion, these two are still finding success, but the success was too heavy of a burden for them to bear without tapping into something extra. But I think something extra has now been found, as Rollins has proven to be one of the smartest and craftiest superstars on the roster, and some would say he's an architect, a visionary, and even revolutionary. And now that he has found another wise man in Paul Heyman to bounce his ideas off of, it should be very easy for them to come up with a perfect game plan each and every time out. But now teaming up with a dog and physical freak in Braun Breaker, he certainly does not need an entire bloodline to make up for an obvious lack of wrestling ability that Roman Reigns displayed each and every time to the ring. And indeed, he can use Breaker to take that physical toll off of himself on a week in and week out basis to save energy for those big matches, which is exactly what you saw on Raw this week when Breaker easily dispatched of Zayn after he refused Rollins' generous offer. And then as for Becky, well, she is also extremely cunning and knows how to use her influence to immediately win 2 different titles upon returns after long hiatuses. And she also got herself a tag title match with Lita, despite them having no prior matches together. And indeed, she got herself that NXT title match without even being on that show, so clearly she will use both of her smarts and her skills to quickly get herself another title match, which is exactly what she already found a way to do on Raw by easily coaxing Lyra Valkyria into a title match for the women's IC title at Backlash. So I guess at the end of the day, being back in business is what's best for business for these two. And as the old saying goes, happy wife, happy life, and if nothing else, these two have continued to rack up titles since SummerSlam of 2021 as a happily married couple who almost are always conducting themselves inside the ring on the exact same wavelength as the other, and that they found a way to do so again over WrestleMania weekend in Vegas is absolutely no coincidence. So now they've positioned themselves perfectly to vanquish their biggest rivals and go after more gold together. So as always, we've got to give a final grade, so these attitude adjustments get an okay for Seth and an okay for Becky. So I guess that makes this double okay. With these two in perfect alignment, it looks like there will be a lot of burning it down and a lot of lasses getting kicked for the foreseeable future. But if you missed what those two were up to on this week's Raw, be sure to go right on over here and check out my grades for every segment, because if you don't, just like Lyra thinking that she's a better wrestler than Becky, well, that would be not okay.